Just letting everybody in and getting ourselves organized here. Thank you for joining us today for our next in our series of virtual coffee chats. Today's a bit of an interesting one, a little bit of a departure from some of the more sponsorship focused ones, but I think based on everything that's going on in the world right now, it's so highlighted and worth having the conversation. And really glad to have a fantastic panel of people joining us for the conversation just about branding, messaging, what's going on in terms of positioning, how that's being received, systemic racism, and everything involved in that. I am certainly not the expert on that, and I'm happy to step back and share the platform with Megan Ford and Lena Mazar and Janice Smith, who isn't on the call yet, but will be joining hopefully shortly. But what I'll do is just give a bit of a plug. If you haven't used Zoom before, you can change the setup of how you see everybody in the top right of your screen. You can change it from speaker view to gallery view, whether you want to see everybody on the call or whether you just want to see the speakers. The bottom left has your microphone, so you can put yourself on mute, take yourself off mute if you want to join in on the conversation. Janice has joined us, fantastic. And you also have the opportunity to ask some questions in the chat. So the chat is just in the bottom center. So feel free to jump in with questions as well there. And we've been running these sessions every week for the last 12 weeks or so. We're going to take a break for the next few weeks for the summer, knowing that a lot of people aren't going to be around, and come back to it in the fall. It's been really good to have this. So that all being said, I'm going to pass the floor off to Megan, Alina, and Janice, and give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So why don't I pass it off to you, Janice, to start.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brad. So I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for ADRA Canada. So if I can just give you a little bit of feedback of who ADRA is. So ADRA is an acronym for Adventist Development and Relief Agency. We're the humanitarian arm of the Adventist Church, which is a global organization which extend our reach into 130 countries. We do relief and development regardless of your race, your gender, your political affiliation, or religious affiliation. Our purpose is to help people live as God has intended them to. So my role there is to bring awareness, build relationship, and engage our community in our mission. Thank you.
Alina, you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Alina. I'm a partner and managing director at an advertising agency in Toronto called Fuse Create. We're an integrated shop, and we support clients across North America and creating obviously their advertising campaigns, but also just overall marketing strategy. I actually oversee our experiential division. So we would work with, people like Brad and other sponsors and partners and brands, and developing sort of that brand's experiential strategy and activating it. So I'm really excited to be here. This is definitely a hot topic, and one that I'm very passionate about. Myself, I'm an immigrant to Canada. I've been here for about 20 years now, I want to say. And it's been, an interesting journey, and seeing it from my lens, from my parents' lens, and also obviously this subject and everything that's happening right now on both the Black Lives Matter movement, but also just overall awareness in, systemic racism and how our systems are created, or something that I'm quite passionate about.
Hi, I'm Megan. I just came back from spending the past 2 years in the UK, so I have a lot of PR, copywriting, social communications and digital communications background. I was working at an agency back in the UK, so it's interesting getting to see the Black Lives Matter movement kick off in the States, watching it from there, and then moving back here to seeing how that kicked off. I tend to do a lot of writing about racial issues, especially in our current climate and just in our workforce and that sort of thing. So this is something I'm definitely very passionate about. All right, so I think I'm going to kick it off with our first question for the day. So a question that's been asked a lot is why now? So what's different about George Floyd's death, and why has that sparked a worldwide uprising, and how has COVID affected this movement now? So I don't know if any of you want to kick that off.
So, okay, I'll start. I'll start. The first thing I want to say is in terms of George. So his death is no more painful than the death that have occurred in the past, all the other deaths that have happened. The reason why it is so prominent, and it seems like George is the theme of the day, is that because of the time we're living in. COVID has really brought us together. We're home, we're with our families, we're mourning together. The haves are helping the have-nots. So everyone is working together to help each other out. So I would say we're all in the same game. So we're on the same playing field. Everyone is in the same game. So what's happening with George really have touched people's hearts. Like compassion has really come up because the world is seeing it. The world is seeing it. It's not something, he's not new, but the fact that the world is seeing it now, people's emotions are really high right now. So they can be more compassionate towards what is happening in the situation at the moment.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think COVID has just, as we consume media, we're consuming media 24/7 because we're living through our screens 24/7. And I think the world of COVID has, almost amplified the issues that already existed, because I think we're all consuming them now at the same time, and we're almost like extra connected. So it's pretty clear who are struggling and why they're struggling, and our socioeconomic issues are becoming even clearer, and challenges people who are unemployed are having with their access to healthcare is even clearer. So I think this is another one of those, to Janice's point, there are many, men and women that came before George Floyd, but I think the timing, as all of us banding together globally, all of us focused on our screens and viewing media through our screens consistently, and that sort of amplified voices, we can be a bit more vulnerable behind a keyboard. Let's be honest. We don't need to, when you're being loud with what you believe in, and you're doing it on Twitter or supporting a cause that the world is supporting, people who may have been on the fence on whether they actually want to project their opinion are now leaning towards projecting their opinion. And really, when you think about how movements occur, it is the masses that create a movement. And I think you can see that it's not, especially with the Black Lives Matter protests after George Floyd, it's not one person or one type of person or one race that's protesting this. Now you've got many races, many genders, many ethnicities, many, types of people around the world are coming together saying, yeah, actually, this is not a thing we believe in. So I do think COVID and the timing of this had a huge impact. Plus, we have nothing else to do. So, we're hyper-focused and more aware of things that we may not have time to think about before.
I think that's a big point of it, is that we just have time now. I feel like when this kicked off, and this, wave of the movement kicked off, it was almost like Ahmaud Arbery had died, and Breonna Taylor had died, and George Floyd had died. It felt like we were learning about a new death every day of the week. And
right.
I feel for Black people, it wasn't anything new. It was just, other people are noticing now. Now that everyone collectively has the time to go and protest or to say something, you do have the comfortability of having a screen between you and, let's say, your coworkers, or you and just your everyday society and the people you communicate with,
Mhm.
on top of just like people are there. And it's also an election year in the States that also puts a big impact on things.
Oh, amplifies it in a huge way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if I can add another point in terms of George, the way it was done in broad daylight
Yeah.
really brought, well, I would say brought Black people back to the time of slavery, where all our punishment, all the cruelty was done, put on display in front of everyone. And the fact that that was done then, the middle of the day, it was done without regards. The police officer had his hand in his pocket, and it was like nonchalant, no big deal, in front of everyone, really brought us back to how far that we came from. All this that was stored up inside of us is finally, enough is enough. This is the straw. This is it's time to stop this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And talking about like, is this a movement or a moment? That's coming up a lot lately. And I think what makes that different is that people of other ethnicities are starting to notice, and they're enraged not only by police brutality, but things that their own communities are impacting, whether it's colorism or that's the way they have their own prejudice towards Black people. Hasan Minhaj is a comedian, but he has a show on Netflix called The Patriot Act, and he did a really good segment on Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, and talked about how even in that murder, which was terrible, we're all focusing on this one white police officer, whereas the other police officers were Asian. The person who called was Middle Eastern. Like, it's everyone involved. It's not just white people. It's not white people versus us. It's us as a community. How can we all change the narrative? Because we're all the problem here.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think the moment versus movement is a really interesting topic, because I do think we've had moments like this before, and if you look back in time and you look at some of, the key moments of uprising, when it comes to race relations, we've absolutely had these moments. But the reason why I believe we're sitting in a point of a movement is because I think now we're forcing accountability. And if you listen to the language and the language of change and the language of, actually on a grassroots level, what can people do to make a difference in their community? That's the language that creates a movement, I think. And it's not, again, it's not one type of person. You're 100% right, Megan. It is the system. Like, you do look at the police officers around the George Floyd situation who didn't say a word and watched this happen, and I think that's where that's where movements come from, is when you're not just keeping the guy who did it, making him accountable, but you're looking at everyone surrounding him and the circle that he is allowed to do these things in, and you're making the circle accountable, and you're making, those processes that may not exist in those counties, whether it's, the fact that you can he can put his knee on the guy and strangle him. Like, there is no law saying he can't do that in many parts of the United States. Those are the problems, right? And so I think when you look at this being a movement, I do think there's a large number of people who are almost going to the root and trying to understand how to fix the root, and making people accountable to fix the root too, and making that happen, versus a moment. I feel like we would be loud and we would be all over social media, but that's where it ends. It's very superficial.
I agree with you. Just a little bit of different perspective. For me, the moment is your opportunity to educate, recognize, and then move forward. To be in the moment and to stay in the moment, then it's just a fad, right? You're just doing things now because that's what's happening now. So you want to get all this out to make yourself look good. But to take the moment to recognize and educate, and then you want to move forward. And that's where the movement comes in, as Alina is saying. So now you just got to take it, learn from it, and then move forward.
Yeah, I definitely agree that right now is the time for difficult conversations, whether through your family, your friends, your coworkers. And I
Hmm.
am seeing a lot of people have those difficult conversations about things that, you know, seemed taboo before. But even in the Black community, people are talking about, all Black lives matter, trans lives matter. You have to take account for everyone instead of just focusing on the big issue. I feel like this happens a lot in feminism, where you look at what's the big issue here rather than like how do the intersectionalities of all these affect everyone else. Right now we're looking at everyone else, we're looking at the big picture so we can change society as a whole now instead of just fixing the majority so that we look good on paper almost. um, our next question is about workplace diversity and white fragility. How do you think that plays into this movement? How do you think it's going to change?
Well, I definitely think there has to be some change. I have seen, like, I've been here since 1975 from Jamaica. I started working at the age of 14, a single mom, 6 of us. So I've been in the workplace for a while now. And, I have noticed being the diversity in the workplace then actually hasn't changed much. It hasn't changed much. I have seen a lot of tokens. I see a lack of diversity in the C-suites, board of directors. I see a lot of that. For the changes to happen, definitely. It's going to be really hard to break that down. There's going to be a bit of struggles. Some people will go for it, some people won't. The change is going to be hard. It's going to be difficult, but if you definitely want to make the change, it can be done. But as I said, the road will be hard.
Yeah, it's a tough conversation, right? I mean, I think everybody sees things from, I mean, that's what biases are. You see things from your perspective. And I think, my partner, he's a white man, second generation Canadian. His dad had to fight to he's an immigrant, had to fight to make the life he wanted. But, my partner's had a pretty good upbringing. And I think even for the two of us, I noticed some of our conversations on race, and especially in the workplace, they're tough discussions, because I think the perspectives are so different. And I think nobody wants to be called racist either. That's a dirty word. So I feel like a lot of the time it's just doing the work to prove you're not a racist and to prove that you're diverse versus doing the actual work, which is having difficult conversations and talking about the systems that exist in your hiring practices, or the system or the biases that exist in your organization. I mean, everybody has biases. That's just a normal part of being a human being, because you're attracted to those who are like you, or who speak like you, or who act like you, or who had a similar upbringing as you. Like that's who we are as people. And I think actually having awareness of that requires some pretty difficult conversations. And as it relates to, myself and the conversations I'm having with my partner, it is making him aware of the things that I've gone through, or the things that my parents have gone through, or the things that, people in my community, people of color, Black people, like things I've experienced them going through too. So I think, first off, to Janice's point, the awareness is really important. Now we've got that. We're talking about it. We're having those difficult conversations. Now it's actually time to do the work. And the work isn't going to be tomorrow and that's it. It is going to be years worth, and it is going to be trying to figure out how to actually change the system, because it doesn't start when you enter the workforce, and it doesn't, you don't have one, person of color or Black person in your C-suite and it's over. That's just not it. It is changing systems take time. Think how much time it took to make these systems in the first place. So we've got to just realize that the hard work is going to continue, and it's going to require conversation and having people at the table who have been through the things that we're talking about.
100% I agree. I think a problem that I've recognized through the past few weeks is that for a lot of white people in particular, they just don't acknowledge racism because they've never had to think about their own race to begin with. So the things that we face on a daily basis, they've never even noticed or acknowledged ever. So in terms of white fragility and how we combat that in the workforce, I think it's just people have to, again, what you said, Alina, is to focus less on not being racist and just focus better on kind of getting past whatever biases they have or any missteps that they've taken, focusing on how to improve that rather than trying to convince other people around them that they aren't racist, because everyone has prejudice to some extent. That's natural. We all have it. We have to grow past that, acknowledge it, and just move on. The only way we're going to make a better society is if we just acknowledge our faults and move past them. Because when you focus more on convincing others why you're not racist, you're making the problem about yourself rather than the community you're affecting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think if the focus is on that, we're not going to change businesses. People have to acknowledge, hey, are you hiring people because you can actually pronounce their name, or because they look like you, or because they're certain size, or you relate to them in one way or another. These are all things that we can't really, that people don't even notice really. But I think with these conversations, these difficult conversations we're having with ourselves and with others, that's going to change, hopefully, at least.
I think so. I mean, I think I go back to the word accountability, right? I think we're making people accountable for it now. And I think I think we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but that accountability needs to exist at all layers and all levels,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
if that accountability can continue, then I do think the awareness plus the accountability together should turn into practices that work for your organization to create that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that will help with overcoming, historical tropes in leadership. We've seen this a lot in media businesses like Condé Nast and like Bon Appetit and things, where they're realizing that you can't, for the higher up to the C-suite, you can't just say, hey, we're going to unteach this racism. You just have to start new sometimes and just say, hey, we're not going to hire racism, teach them how not to be racist. We're just going to hire people who their morals fit in with, the code of that company, and move forward from there.
Yeah, I mean, that part is so hard, right? I think when you look at C-suite, and you just look at business as a whole, that C-suite is reflective of what business looked like as that C-suite was going through the ranks. Business did look like that, and especially if you look at Canada, the United States, it was primarily white, primarily male. And so those are the guys that are sitting in C-suite right now. I think the challenge has been how long that they've been there. And the almost like old practices that they hold on to. So I think you're right, Megan. I do think it is, how do you create more opportunity for people at that table, or how do you realign your staffing to your values? I agree, like your CEO and your C-suite should, if you're saying inclusivity and diversity, those are our key values. Well, you've got to make sure that everybody at that C-suite table believes in that too and is pushing that. And if they're not, it's time to move on and get a new person there. If you do legitimately have people at the table that believe in that, because, I look at my own organization and my partners, we've got a pretty good split between men and women, but the three founders are all, older white men, but they believe in it. And they've, I look at the last 5 years, they've completely flipped that executive team, and they've got people like myself. I'm, younger, I'm an immigrant, I'm a person of color. They've got other women on the team. They've really tried hard to create a leadership team where we can lean into conversations like this one, because the right people are there to have those conversations. And so I think that's where, to me, the C-suite table and leadership table is so important. And if those people aren't at the table already, I do think that you've got to create that opportunity, and it has to be past levels of seniority or, the fact, have you gone through the system? I do think fresh blood is required for some of this conversation.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting seeing let me read with this. I think it's interesting seeing companies now giving their statements and their little pretty branding on social media, saying kind of, we stand with Black Lives Matter, we're not racist, here's, you know, X amount of money to this company here and there, but then in the same breath are reprimanding their own employees for speaking out against Black Lives, or speaking out for Black Lives Matter, and they're speaking out at racism, whether that's in their own company or just in general. I think authenticity matters a lot during this moment, and at any level that has to be called out. So while C-suite has, you know, a big impact on these things, and we have to take away the cis white male narrative from these businesses if they're going to reflect their current values, it takes everyone at every level to speak out against these things. And then we have to watch these companies and look at them and see how they're responding to their employees, you know, taking their PR statement and going forward with it, because a lot of them are saying one thing, but their actions are completely different.
Yeah, and that's what moving forward will be, where people are actually, our corporations are actually looking at that and trying to make a difference. And Alina, you said it's not going to happen tomorrow, but I think a lot of people are going to be looking, employees are going to be looking to see, okay, who's at the bottom of the barrel? When you say you're an equal opportunity company, but then the only people, the majority of the people at the bottom are all minorities. The majority of people at the top are whites. So I think what's going to happen now, everybody is going to be looking now. And when you say you're an equal opportunity company, people are going to be looking to see, are you really equal opportunity? You know, where am I in the top? Who's reflecting me at the top? Am I well knowledgeable, have a lot of skills, so I could be somewhere at the top, but instead, because of my gender, my race, I end up in customer service, or I am the cleaner, right? So I think the movement going forward, all your brands now, they're going to have to be very careful and be very honest, be very genuine, be very transparent. And I think that's going to happen in the days, months, years to come now.
And I do think there are, I mean, if you just even look at what's happening in organizations across North America, Megan, to your point, I do think there are whistleblowers that are coming out of organizations, you know, and saying, yeah, our CEO said XYZ, but here's the reality of what's happening, you know, and I feel like that is a situation that companies need to be careful about. You know, I think if there are values that you've identified that are your values, you better be sure those are true to who you are and the kind of organization that you're running. Then I think, honestly, I do think the power is a bit in the consumer's hand. You know, I look at you look at brands that have clearly been, you know, racist through the years, or have leaders that you know, are not supportive, and or we know are supportive on television, but we know the practices that they're doing. We know their production facilities in Southeast Asia where they're paying their people a cent in awful conditions. Like, we know that. So as consumers, our dollar keeps them in business, you know? So I do think this is going back to accountability. Of course, their employees can, you know, make their leadership accountable, because, you know, with what's happening with the platforms that people have, yeah, it's pretty easy now to bring down a large corporation if you know what you're talking about. But on the other end, I do think as buyers and as consumers, we need to be more conscious of the choices that we're making and who we decide to give our money to. Like, that's a decision that we need to actually think about now, versus, you know, just go for wherever you're getting that 50% off sale.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think a lot of people, especially now in quarantine, have just been looking for things that are accessible rather than, am I giving my money to someone whose values I align myself with? And that is difficult, but I think we just have to do more research and be more aware of the political statement that our money is making. Am I going to give my money to someone who is a billionaire who, you know, most of their employees are on welfare, or am I going to give my money to a small business that I know that their values are this and I respect them and I know what they're doing for their community?
100%. And you can see that with, even on a brand perspective, what's happening with Facebook right now, how so many brands across North America have pulled advertising revenue for Facebook. Now, is that a moment in time, or is that going to continue? Who knows? But it is making a pretty big statement right now, you know, that even brand spending, they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. So I do think that, you know, that's something that we need to be conscious of.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've chosen to be blind to a lot of these things, but a lot of people find their information through influencers and through social media. So not using Facebook is a huge statement, and you get to look at those brands and look at their morals. And a lot of the time they do line up with your own. And it is nice because, you know, brands like Lululemon have stepped away from using Facebook, and they're, you know, Canadian owned. You get to look at their morals and stuff, and they're statements they've been making during this moment. And yeah, that is a brand that you might want to support now more than whatever your alternative was prior to that.
Yeah, Megan, you said something in terms of, you know, people, I think it was you that said it, in terms of price, like people buy, you know, what the cheapest thing. And sometimes it really comes down to what they can afford. So
Right.
they might not look into a company, let's use Dollar Store for the sake of using Dollar Store. You know, people at, you know, a lower income, I mean, sometimes I even go to the Dollar Store to pick up stuff, right? So you're looking for something based on your pricing. And for me, it's not so much that I'm looking for the price, but for somebody else, it may be what they can afford. So I think this is where companies need to be more conscious of their community, more conscious of humans. Like, we can't just, you know, forgive me, I'm Christian, so I'm going to go to that biblical say, you know, money is the root of all evil. Like, your focus can't be just money. And I think that's what's coming out now, because the focus of being richer, you're getting business. Yeah, we all want to make a living, but we need to be conscious of what we're giving the people who are supporting our business. And I think that's what's it's going to come down to now. Companies actually are going to be conscious of that, because people are going to start diverting their money somewhere else and say, you know what, you don't care about me, so I'm going to try and find somebody who cares about me. As I know, as a Black person, now I'm thinking, for the years that I have heard that Black people don't invest, Black people don't do this, now I'm just like, oh yeah, okay, let's see if I don't invest. Let me go find somebody else that I'm going to find my own Black people now, and I'm going to invest in them. How is it going to affect your product now? Seeing as I never invest in you before. I don't invest. I'm not in your commercials or whatever. Mind you, now I'm in your commercials. I wasn't in there before, because the lie is that I have never given to you. I have never invested in your company. So why am I showing a Black person or whatever? So from now on, going forward, most of my business is going towards supporting my own, right? And anybody that's ethical, what I don't have in my community, I will look for in another community that is gonna give me what I am looking for, that cares about me, and so forth.
I think we should also, I appreciate what you said about, you know, sometimes all you can afford is going to the dollar store. I think we do have to acknowledge that we do have the privilege of, you know, of living in, you know, middle class society where we can afford the things, we have access to things, where we do have the opportunity to choose what we want, where a lot of people don't have that. The only way I can really relate to this is I've been seeing a lot of discussion going on about sustainable living and buying sustainable clothing and secondhand, or just buying clothes that are ethically made. But for a lot of people, that's not an opportunity. If you, you know, your pant size goes over a certain number, you don't have that opportunity. So you are buying from companies that are fast fashion and that sort of thing. And I think that cancel culture has focused more on, are you this kind of ally versus what are you doing that helps you survive the best kind of thing. So if there are companies that align with your morals, but, you know, let's say they're still fast fashion, you can't demonize those people for doing the best they can with what they have. There are always better options out there, but I think we just have to acknowledge on a large part that some people just can't, they just don't have the access to the things that we do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think though, I guess for me, my comment is more with people who do hold wealth, you know, because I think if you look at people who are already, you know, in that part of society that they are struggling on a, you know, and to be completely honest, a lot of those people are people of color. They are, you know, just traditionally, those are the people that are struggling in those lower income levels. I think that, you know, for a long time, it was just on them to figure out how to survive and also have a voice in difficult matters like race relations and like, you know, systemic challenge that they're having. I think now the onus should be, you know, if you are holding wealth and you are making big purchase decisions and you are in a position where you can make those choices, I actually think we should be louder with our choices and more vocal with why we're making certain choices and why certain brands are the ones that we believe in and not. You know, as Janice, I look at your example when you're talking about, you know, organizations in your passing, Black people don't invest. Well, I actually think for myself, I would want to know that. Like, I'd actually want to hear those stories about brands that don't live by my values so that I, as a consumer, can make more conscious decisions. I think before, to Megan, your point, we weren't really thinking about it. For those of us who have wealth and are making big decisions, we weren't thinking about it. But for me, like, I look right now and I look at Amazon, you know, Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. You know, he could fix hunger for many countries with the amount of money that he has. Right. And for me, I haven't seen a word come out from Amazon, you know, and I haven't seen him do anything to support anyone really, other than his own wealth. Sorry if anyone here works for Amazon, totally butchering it right now. So for me, you know, that's a conscious decision I've made to say, well, I don't actually want to support this person. You know, and I know I'm not going to get my next day shipping. I'm going to have to deal with a lack of convenience here. But it's more important to me that I support, you know, a local grocer or, you know, the person down the street who is suffering in our community right now and is a Black-owned business. You know, those are the kind of decisions I think people with wealth need to be making, and also need to be vocal on the other end in saying that, you know, you've got organizations like the Gap that are still running sweatshops. Like, these are important discussions to have, and I don't think we can, you know, just throw it under the rug anymore, sweep it under the rug.
Yeah, we have a question from Kathleen that's about brand spending. So she says, should orgs be using the money they may be saving in July due to the Stop the Hate campaign towards non-for-profit organizations and Black Lives Matter? Do you have thoughts related to choosing what group to partner with?
Ooh, good question.
That's so funny. I'm going to be so biased in this one.
Jen's like, partner with me.
Yeah. Adra, hello, we're here. Yeah. I don't see why not. I think that's a great idea. I don't see why not. I am one person that believe that if we can do good, when you're privileged, your responsibility is even greater. And I think when the opportunity comes for you to do good, why not? Do good. You know, ADRA is here, and I know there are many other great charities out there during this time of COVID-19 that is, you know, pushing for more funds to help people around the world. So if you have the funds and you can do it, yeah, by all means, check out the charity. Go to adra.ca and check us out and feel free. We're busy with COVID-19. We're busy with the 130 countries that we're dealing with right now, trying to help people of the world. So by all means, I say yes, go for it. Do good, go for it.
I think what a lot of people are doing is people of privilege are donating and giving their resources because they think they have to, because again, they don't want to be seen as they don't see it as racist. But what a lot of people have to do is, figure out what your morals and your values are and do the research to find what charities or companies best align with you specifically. There's not one, charity fits all or one organization fits all that's going to work with you or what you care about. You might be more inclined to, supporting Black trans lives or supporting companies that help feed low-income children. It depends on what specifically to you matters, and you just have to do the research to do that. I feel like a lot of people want the easy way out with these sort of things. You just kind of have to research and find out what's for you.
I actually think this is the time to do some re-strategizing, to be honest. I think that it is about going back to your values, your goals, your objectives, and identifying how you can actually build a more long-term program, so it isn't about just right now. Is there a way you can test something right now now that you have budgets? Are there organizations that you can work with to build a program that's right for you, and test something charitable out there in the market, or find different opportunities for your teams to volunteer with various organizations? Are there ways you can build something so that you can actually show your C-suite as well that, hey, here's the amazing thing we did in July with our money. Here's the incredible feedback we're getting from it. And it's not just about external feedback anymore, right? It's also about internal feedback and how motivated your employees are and how much pride they have for their organization. So if you can find a way to quantify that feedback and quantify that conversation and then share that back to your C-suite, the hope should be, and the goal should be, to create a sort of a longer lasting program that continues to drive change, year over year, or continues to do good in some way year over year.
If I can touch base on this, and this is because of the organization I am from, and it's a religious-based organization. And that's one of the prejudice that bugs me, that, you hear that a lot of corporations don't want to give to religious-based organizations. So let me just quickly say this. If an organization is out there, religious-based or not, and they're doing good work, you have checked them out, they have the credibility, they're showing the work that they're doing. You look at their annual statement and you see that the work is good. Give them a chance. Give them a chance. I've seen this too much. Trying to call corporations like, we don't touch your religious base. I don't want to hear that. I think this is a time, as you said, to go out, research the company. If you have something and it's in line with your strategy, your vision, whatever it is, then give that organization an opportunity. Done. Did we lose Megan?
Megan looks a little frozen.
Yeah.
I wonder if, I think I can probably just jump in and take on it, the next question. One of the things that I think we did want to talk to Janice was all around internships. We had this conversation yesterday, and we were talking about sort of looking at internships, and a lot of organizations talk about unpaid internships and the impact on diversity in organizations at that level. And, when we were talking about this yesterday, I think you go back to you go back to culture of haves and have-nots, right? And I think you go back to economic inequality, where there are, if an organization is, providing an internship and it is an unpaid internship, I think we're in a situation where only a certain type of person is going to be able to take that role on. and it's only a certain type of person that's even going to be able to be at the table in that situation, and that is a person of privilege. So you're already just Xing such a large group of society that for whatever reason can't afford to be there. And then as you look at that industry, I mean, advertising is a great example of this, because, you know, I remember when I started, there was a lot of unpaid internships. And for me, I mean, I couldn't afford to do that. I had to pay my way through school. So for me, that was never a thing that I went to. So I think that already that's an easy way for organizations to actually change who they're getting and who they're hiring at that junior level. And there's some easy switches you can do there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to give you an example with my situation. So I mentioned that I start working at the age of 14 from a single mom. You know, 6 of us, she had to do it. As a young person, you know, you want to help out at home and you want to get your own things as well. For me, internship, no, I couldn't do that, you know? So once again, as you said, it goes back to the haves and the have not. So I think what maybe, and I just say maybe because I don't know, we should stop the unpaid internship. Even if they do something like a stipend, pay for travel or whatever, but there have to be something where everybody gets an opportunity, because right now the way it's set up, if you can't afford it, you're paying for your own schooling because your family can, or maybe you're helping your family, you know, you can't step into that. You have to go out and work to provide. So I think that's something definitely that needs to be considered, so that diversity will have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, sorry for disappearing for a second.
Welcome back.
But yeah, I completely agree. I grew up in a very working class, predominantly like first or second generation suburb, where there was no handouts. There was no, oh, here's where I'm going to, you know, my cottage or my whatever. Like, it was a luxury to like go to a Sega kind of thing.
Yeah.
So for me, I went to university, predominantly white university, where there was generational wealth, which I had, like, that was the first time I'd ever clued into, like, oh, people have opportunities, and they're not all, you know, they're not all being supported by like government funding, like OSAP and that sort of thing, to go to school. They have the freedom to, you know, have their parents buy them a car and have their school paid for. And so did I. I had my parents pay. I had a very easy ride. Thanks parents, if you're watching. But for other people, they didn't have that. So the thought of an unpaid internship was unheard of, especially when, you know, you have to take such expensive transit into the city to go and do that. Then you have to, you know, pay for the price of living there and that sort of thing. It's just not reasonable. And I think hopefully that'll start to change. I think with grade 9, once they've stopped the academic applied and essential, that sort of thing, that will hopefully level out the playing field. So when people do go to university and they do go into these internships, they will have a bit more of a level playing ground, and hopefully if they're not paid for, they are stipend.
Yeah.
Agreed.
What steps can be taken to dismantle systemic racism when you're not in a position of power? So you're not a CEO, a head of leadership, etc.
Ooh,
Yeah.
big question. So my perspective is that I think it's incumbent on all of us. It doesn't matter the level.
Yeah.
You know, I think that I also think that as a leader, and as someone in the C-suite at my organization, there's so much I don't see, you know, and I do think it's funny, when I wasn't a leader, I would think, I don't understand why they don't see it and how they can't, you know, how they don't do X, Y, and Z. But legitimately, there's so much that I don't see. And I think that's, to me, I think that's why it's so incumbent that if we're actually going to change systemic racism within, or change our systems, whether it's in, you know, how we recruit, how we hire, how we promote, you know, what are those benchmarks for people? It starts, everybody's got to be vocal at all levels, and everybody's got to be, you have to have an environment where it's safe for people to do that, number one. Then I think that is what leadership creates. I think leaders need to create an environment where people can come to you and have difficult conversations about race, about gender, about equality and or inequality. You need to be able to be open to those discussions and not take them personally either, because I do think race is a very, and racism is a very personal conversation. So I do think leaders, their jobs are to create an open and inclusive environment. And then I do think people need to bring awareness to issues, be vocal about them. And also, if there are solutions that people have in mind, employees have in mind, I think the best solutions I've ever seen in changing systems in an organization comes from people who are in the organization, working on the day-to-day versus from the C-suite. Because I do think the C-suite is a bit detached from what's happening on the day-to-day. So I think if employees, this is where like task forces and things like that are actually quite beneficial, because I do think that'll allow employees to have a voice, but also it'll allow them to be a part of the solution. And I think if we can change the narrative a little bit to being solutions-based and trying to create things that help, dismantle those systems that are creating inequality within our organizations, or help create a voice for communities that potentially wouldn't have opportunities within our industry because of unpaid internships, like if we can actually just tackle one or two of those issues and start dismantling it and recreating it, I do think that will eventually, if we do one every quarter or one every half and make our goals small and tangible and achievable, we will get to the point, 10 years from now where we've done a lot, but I do think we have to start, small step at a time.
I completely agree. I find that people often worry, I'm not in a position of power, so how can I help? But in the same, breath, they're asking like, how can I use my white privilege to be of power and of use to other people? And that is just, if you see something questionable in your workplace or just in life in general, question it, ask why that's happening, and figure out ways that you can change that, whether it's, something small. If you see, I don't know, let's say someone comes into work with a new hairstyle and you see a coworker go and touch their hair, be that person, say, hey, you know what, that's actually, don't do that. That's really offensive. Here's why. You're having a small conversation to change your social bubble at work, and that, might change their perspective. They might do some research and that might just change your work environment completely.
Yeah. Another thing I would add to that, which is one thing I really like, is open door policy. I think from the management level, director, C-suites, wherever, that open door policy is so important, and you letting your employee know that, yeah, you can come to me, you can talk to me and stuff, and actually don't just open your door, but when they come and talk to you, you're offended or get turned away, but you actually give them the opportunity to come in when you say you have that open door policy. Alina, you said something about starting a little bit at a time. And when you start out, it's going to be like anything else. It's going to be very uncomfortable when you start. But as you do it, whether it's, I don't know, monthly staff meeting, quarterly staff meeting, we bring it up at our workplace and we talk about racism. Lately, we started even before all this happened, which was a good thing. But, you'll realize you start understanding people, you start getting more comfortable. Your staff start getting more comfortable to come and speak to you about things that are happening. And you will see the difference in your work environment in terms of how people relate to each other. Because believe it or not, we're spending 8-10 hours. Some of us are spending ridiculous hours at the office. So it becomes our second family. So why not treat them as that? So I would love to see if companies can, adapt that open door policy. It's nothing new. It's been going on for a long time.
Speaking of an open door policy, we are almost coming to an end here. So if anyone who is watching has any last minute questions they want to ask, now would be a great time to do so. Until anyone asks anything.
I do think, Megan, there's a question in here which you may not be able to see because I think you had to restart.
Maybe.
And it's from Ross, and he's saying that they're a not-for-profit amateur sports club. They have a little bit of diversity among their members, but they haven't really been proactive in including and welcoming people of color or other minorities. Also, and he's 100% right, where from past experience, participation in sport and membership of a sports club can benefit young people. And so he's thinking about how to engage more people of color and other minorities, and what actions to take to remove barriers to entry, including fees. And so any comments, suggestions around communication and messaging would be helpful to him. I mean, I think that honestly, the first thing is the barriers on fees. You know, I would start there, because I think about myself, and I encourage the two of you to jump in, but you know, my family, when we were growing up, we absolutely could not afford to be a part of anything like that. So I think fees are a huge barrier. But I also wonder if there are, other ways to, because obviously as a members only club, you've got to make an income. So I'm wondering even if there are ways to sort of balance out fees with other services that you can potentially offer, whether it's things like daycare or, services that actually can support the community. But I do think that there's usually a big financial challenge is sort of where things start with being members of something like this. What do you ladies think?
Well, I came from an age where everything was free, sorry to say. You go to school, you get your whole uniform, you're in every activity and stuff. So this for me is really, really different. Like I always find it's surprising that, schools don't offer as much as they used to as before. But I definitely think when it comes to private memberships for sport club, definitely considering fees, maybe come up with some alternative ways for you to subsidize that fee. I can't think of what right now, but I think daycare is a good one to do. I'm not sure what your messaging would be. That would be more like public relations or marketing that could help with that. But
I think you just have to focus on where you're sending this message out. That also makes a big difference in the language you're using and just the accessibility. Are you making this accessible to everyone, or are you trying to set, I don't know, not a standard, but are you connecting with people you're familiar with and you're comfortable with? Or are you trying to genuinely help this community? So I think, just as you said, finding different funding to make this affordable for them, using language that they're comfortable with, accessing them in locations that they're comfortable with, that will help diversify you, because this is more than just finding the token people to enter your organization. This is genuinely, how am I going to change the community?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks so much, everybody. It's just been incredible discussion, and certainly know that there's no way that 1 hour can encapsulate everything that needs to be discussed. And Alina, Megan, Janice, thank you for taking this on. We were looking through the questions that were sent and probably could have had a full day session on all of this and beyond. It's been so important to address it, and really enlightening to hear your perspectives and ideas for how things can move forward. And I just want to thank you for giving up your time today, and give you an opportunity if you have any last thoughts from your end.
I think I'll just say, what we all have to work a little bit better on is separating our intent from our impact. I think a lot of people, at least especially the people who took the time to come on this chat, have a good heart. They have a good heart and they want to do well, but what we want isn't always what we're giving out to people. So we have to separate our intent from what's actually given to these communities or given to the people in our lives, and focusing more on that is how it's gonna make change.
yeah, I wrote something down here that I wanted to end on, and mine is, remember this, your community welfare will determine your welfare. And that's where I'm going to end it.
I think that's a great place to end it. I have nothing else to add.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much again for your time today. It's just been incredible, and thank you everybody for joining us as part of the discussion. And I'm going to throw this out there, and hopefully the three of you are open to it. When I send out the follow-up email tomorrow, I'll include your email in case anybody wants to bounce some questions or thoughts or ideas off of you.
Okay.
To carry on the conversation, because the idea is it a movement or a moment, and I really want it to be more than just the 1 hour that you've had here to continue this conversation, and look forward to maybe having a recap on it sometime in the future.
Would love that.
Love that. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thanks so much, everybody, and look forward to chatting with you again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.